Good morning. I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We start with labor strikes across the country and a tentative deal for screenwriters in Hollywood. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter joins us from California with the very latest on that story.
We've been hearing that areas regarding residuals, minimum staffing, revenue sharing when shows hit streaming, as well as AI and data transparency have been hammered out. As with all deals, union members have to vote, and WGA member Al Septian says ratification should not be a problem.
We know that our negotiating committee is not going to accept a deal that's subpar because we trust them, and they've led us through this.
The strike has been ongoing since early May. In California, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed, thanks. And we're also monitoring developments in the autoworkers strike after the UAW expanded the work stoppage Friday. This morning, the two sides remain far apart on key issues, and Bloomberg's Ed Corey joins us from Detroit with the latest.
Those issues include pay, benefits, and job protections. In a Sunday television appearance, U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said automakers can achieve a win-win by sharing strong profits with workers. President Joe Biden travels to Michigan Tuesday to support striking UAW members. Meanwhile, union workers at Ford Canada have ratified a 3-year deal that locks in substantial wage gains. In Detroit, Ed Corey, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed, thank you. Now let's stay in Michigan. Tomorrow, President Biden will make another pitch to residents of the state, his economic record. Bloomberg political reporter Mark Niquette says it's an issue on a lot of consumers' minds because how the economy looks on paper does not match up with what they are experiencing.
He has a record to run on. He's passed significant legislation that is making investments in infrastructure and chips and other things in the economy. The numbers are getting better, but people are just aren't feeling it.
Bloomberg's Mark Niquette says the challenge for President Biden will be convincing Americans that the economy is strengthening as inflation drops.
And Amy, as you know, we're closely following developments on Capitol Hill with a potential government shutdown by the end of the week. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has been trying to rally hardline members of his own party to pass a stopgap spending measure, but the speaker continues to face pushback. Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz told Fox News over the weekend a shutdown may be needed for a few days to meet the demands of conservatives. Louisiana Representative and McCarthy ally Garrett Graves has a message for GOP holdouts.
If you want to empower Senator Schumer, if you want to empower Joe Biden, then what you do is you let government shut down. You don't pursue a continuing resolution. You don't pass the appropriations bills. That is the liberal solution.
Republican Representative Garrett Graves says he wants to see a continuing resolution keeping the government open. The federal government's current funding is set to run out on Saturday.
And the tech space is also in focus this morning, centering specifically on AI. Amazon will invest up to $4 billion into artificial intelligence startup Anthropic, a major player in the generative artificial intelligence space. Anthropic aims to make a safer kind of chatbot for tasks like searching, answering questions, and coding. The AI company will move most of its software to Amazon Web Services data centers and use the cloud computing company's homegrown chips to train the models it uses to power chatbots and other applications. Founded by OpenAI veterans, Anthropic has raised more than $1 billion so far.
Well, overseas this morning, Amy, we're also following developments in the banking industry. We spoke exclusively with UBS CEO Sergio Ermotti, who's making his first trip to China since UBS took over Credit Suisse. Ermotti says he wants to reiterate the firm's commitment to clients in China.
This is my first trip to Asia since taking on again my role at UBS, and I think it's very important for me to reach out to all the Chinese stakeholders and reiterate our commitment to China while also updating them on the integration.
UBS CEO Sergio Ermotti also discussed the bank's effort to regain funds from its Credit Suisse integration in an exclusive conversation with our John Liu in Beijing. You can hear the full conversation on the Bloomberg Talks podcast feed. Download all our high-profile conversations wherever you get your podcasts.
And we have news on a major victory for NASA this morning. A NASA capsule containing chunks of an asteroid that may hold clues to the solar system landed in the Utah desert yesterday. Cosmochemist Dr. Natalie Starkey says the findings will help scientists get a snapshot of what materials were present when the solar system first formed.
We don't have any other samples that can tell us about those times. And the important thing is they're pristine because they haven't been through atmospheric entry. They're going to be looked after in this capsule that's come back from the spacecraft, and they're just the perfect samples that we could hope for.
Cosmochemist Dr. Natalie Starkey says the NASA mission has been more than a decade in the making. Researchers plan to study those rocks and use the mission to inform future exploration.
And again, Amy, futures are lower this morning. S&P futures down 0.1%, down about 6 points. Dow futures down 0.1% or 46 points. And NASDAQ futures down 0.1% or 19 points. 10-year Treasury down 11/32. The yield 4.48%. And straight ahead, we have more global headlines, plus a check of sports. And this is Bloomberg.
Thank you, Karen. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Amy. Ophelia may no longer be a tropical storm, but it is still giving the tri-state area headaches with wind and rain. Power companies across the tri-state area have reported more than 6,000 power outages. Many residents woke up yesterday to flooded streets. In Virginia and neighboring North Carolina, power, for the most part, has been restored for Dominion Energy customers. Spokesperson Benita Billingsley-Harris.
That combination of strong winds and heavy rain caused a lot of damage from trees and tree limbs pulling down power lines, breaking poles and other equipment.
Dominion Energy's Benita Billingsley-Harris says they brought in extra crews from other states to respond to the outages. The mayor of El Paso, Texas, says his city is reaching a breaking point over the droves of asylum seekers. The strain is being felt by several border towns with as many as 8,000 migrants crossing into the U.S. every day. On CBS's Face the Nation, heard Sundays on Bloomberg, Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez of Texas blamed the Biden administration for the crisis.
This border crisis is as if a Category 4 hurricane has hit. We're just trying to keep our head above water here in Texas.
But Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who visited the border over the weekend, blamed inaction in Congress.
Our immigration system is absolutely broken, a fact on which everyone agrees, and Congress needs to fix it.
Now, Mexico says it's reached an agreement with the U.S. to deport migrants from its northern cities to stem the sharp rise. Today, authorities in Hawaii are expected to begin allowing the first residents to return to their devastated properties in Lahaina, many for the first time since the historic town was demolished by a wildfire nearly 7 weeks ago. The wildfire killed at least 97 people and destroyed more than 2,000 buildings, most of them homes. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Amy.
All right. Thank you, Michael. We bring you news throughout the day here on Bloomberg Radio, but now you can get the latest news on demand whenever you want it. Subscribe to Bloomberg News now to get the latest headlines at the click of a button. Get informed on your schedule. Listen and subscribe to Bloomberg News now on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, plus Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Time now for the Sports Report, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. For that, we bring in John Stashower. Good
Thanks,
morning,
Amy.
John.
At MetLife Stadium, the Patriots only scored 15 points. It was enough to beat the Jets for the 15th consecutive time. Only one New England touchdown. It was a long one.
Gesicki moves right to left. Jones with a play fake. And a throw down the right seam. It's caught by Farrell Brown. Racing to the 20. 15-10. Chased by Amos. 5. Stretching out to the pylon. A dive for a touchdown. Patriots.
That's radio. The Jets scored one TD. That came fourth quarter, capped an 87-yard drive, which was more yards than the Jets amassed, combining their 13 other possessions. They punted on 8 of the first 9. It was another rough day for Zach Wilson as the Pats beat the Jets 15-10. Both teams are 1-2. New England avoids what would have been their first 0-3 start since 2000. Denver is 0-3, having lost at Miami 70-20. The Dolphins scored 10 touchdowns, 5 in each half. They had 726 yards of offense, the most in the NFL since 1951. The 70 points, the most since Chicago scored 73 in the 1940 championship game. These Bears are 0-3. They've lost 13 straight going back to last season. Kansas City won 41-10. Chiefs were up 34-0 at the half. Big upset in Phoenix. Arizona beat Dallas 28-16. Cowboys were 2-0. They had beaten the Jets and Giants by a combined 70-10. Last night, Pittsburgh won at Las Vegas 23-18. Mets lost in Philadelphia 5-2. The Phils on the verge of clinching a wild card. Arizona leads for the second NL wild card. The D-backs beat the Yankees 7-1. Upset in the WNBA playoffs. The Connecticut Sun took Game 1 of the best-of-5 semifinals from the Liberty. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Amy?
All right, thank you, John. The Bloomberg Sports Report was brought to you by Audi. Don't let someone else drive off in the Audi model you've always wanted. Visit your local tri-state Audi dealer to get behind the wheel of yours today, or visit AudiOffers.com for more information.
From coast to coast, from New York to San Francisco, Boston to Washington, D.C., nationwide on SiriusXM, the Bloomberg Business app, and Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And good morning to you. I'm Amy Morris. UBS CEO Sergio Armati is on his first trip to Beijing since returning to the bank. Both UBS and Credit Suisse have long-standing joint ventures in China where managing the assets of the ultra-wealthy is big business. Armati sat down with Bloomberg's John Liu for an exclusive interview on the Swiss giant's plans in Asia. They started by discussing if Chinese clients still have concerns about the integration of Credit Suisse.
Things are progressing very well. We made very swift progress in integrating Credit Suisse. We closed the transaction in record times, also thanks to the big cooperation of regulators across the globe. And that's one of the reasons why I'm also here today in Beijing, because this is my first trip to Asia since taking on again my role at UBS, and I think it's very important for me to reach out to all the Chinese stakeholders and reiterate our commitment to China, while also updating them on the integration.
So I do know that here in China, UBS has a securities venture. Credit Suisse also had a securities venture. It would seem to make sense to sell out of the Credit Suisse venture. Is that something you're pursuing now?
Well, we are currently evaluating the best options. Of course, we are not allowed to have two operations, but we need to really understand exactly how to do that. We are very happy with our historical operation here in China. That we were the first to get the license as a foreign investors to own a controlled stake. So it's a very important element of our strategy in China. And now we need to exactly evaluate how to integrate or what to do with the CS operation.
Sort of how far have you progressed in that process? Are you looking at potential buyers? Are you talking to anyone yet, or is it not gotten to that place?
At this stage, we are examining the situation.
Okay. In your second quarter results, it mentioned specifically that client confidence, sentiment, and activity here in Asia was muted. Are you still finding that's the case into the third quarter?
Well, I think that we saw in general a little pickup across the globe, also in Asia, in terms of client activity. The most important topic for us was to see the returns of assets that left Credit Suisse in Q4, Q1 this year. We started to see assets coming back at Credit Suisse towards the end of the second quarter. We see also very good momentum in Q3. So that's the most important issue. But also in general, it's fair to say that investors are more constructive than they have been recently.
So on the momentum you talked about in Q3, there was a net new money inflow of about $16 billion in 2Q. You said at the time you expected that to continue. What is it looking like in 3Q? What does good momentum mean?
Well, I mean, we are pursuing similar patterns, so we are not going to be specific on numbers. The quarter is still ongoing, but the most important issue is that we see substantially our forecast being confirmed, and we are getting close of the quarter. So I think that's very encouraging to see that so quickly our clients are responding to our actions to stabilize Credit Suisse and to offer them the best of the combined organizations.
And in Asia, I believe in the second quarter there was a net money inflow about 1.8 or so billion US dollars in Asia. Do you see a similar sort of trajectory in the third quarter as well?
Yeah, we see positive trends across the globe in each region. Yeah.
What about here in China? What does the sentiment feel like? Not only here, but like globally, the perception of China and Chinese assets.
Well, look, in general, in the globe, we are going through very challenging times in terms of macroeconomic, picture. Of course, the geopolitical tensions are not helping at this stage, but I do believe that many investors still sees the long-term potential of China.
That's UBS CEO Sergio Ermotti speaking exclusively with Bloomberg's John Liu in Beijing. Congress is heading into a make-or-break week for avoiding a government shutdown. We are joined now by Dennis Gartman, University of Akron Endowment Chairman and former publisher of the Gartman Letter. Dennis, always a pleasure to have you. Want to take a broader look at the markets as we start this trading week, but there are so many factors impacting the markets, especially now, not the least of which a possible government shutdown. Is that a factor for you too?
Yes, it is a factor, and it should be a factor for everybody. I hope that there is some resolution to this before the week is out, that we actually keep the government intact, but the markets right now seem to think that that's not going to happen, that we're going to continue to see dissension within the troops in Washington, D.C., and that there will be a government shutdown. Even if we get one, I doubt that it lasts very long, but right now the market wants to say it's deleterious to share prices, and that's why we were having difficulty this morning. We had a little bit of a rally in the futures overnight, but that gave up very quickly, and we're making new lows as we speak. So it's disconcerting to say the very least. You also have the continued UAW strikes that seem to be widening, not lessening. And the only good thing is that the writer strike seems to be making some progress. But strikes and government shutdowns are never good for stock prices.
Now, you have been bearish for months now, and just for a few days last week, you were modestly bullish. You were sort of dipping your toe in that water on stocks. Has this kind of ruined that for you? Are you bearish again now?
Yes, it has ruined it for me. The only I trade my own account, and right now I have a very large position in less than 2-year notes, which I'm comfortable with. At 73 years old, income seems to be more important to me than speculative trades. But I'm short about 8% of my portfolio at this point, have been for a while, and as we make new lows, my propensity is to add to that trade. I'm short stocks and long a little bit of gold, and I'm reasonably comfortable with that position. But it scared me being bearish for a while that we had a rally 2 weeks ago, but it seemed to fail very quickly. And the problem with the market was that the rallies were on very light volume, the breaks were on heavier volume, and we failed to make new highs. And at the same time, we had the CNN Fear and Greed Index, which had gotten to 85, was beginning to turn lower, and that's always a definitive signal that markets want to go lower. So for about an hour and a half, I got a little bit concerned. For months and months, I've been very bearish, and I continue to be.
All right, then oil, though, has rallied in recent weeks, and it continues this morning, if not modestly, 0.3% for NYMEX crude, almost 0.5% for Brent crude as we speak for futures. Does that help support what had been a modestly bullish position for you?
Well, the thing to watch in the crude oil market is the fact that the backwardation, the inversion continues to widen. And as long as the market continues to be inverted, as long as the front months gain on the back months on down days and gain on the back months on up days, you have to err upon the side of being bullish of crude oil. $95 WTI seems to be an extremely high price, but it has surprised me the ability for crude to continue to be inverted in the term structure, and it wants to go higher. And higher prices for crude oil are always deleterious to share prices generally. So higher crude oil prices tend to be an added bearish circumstance. So it adds to my overt bearishness in stock prices at this point.
Now, we've been talking about inflation. We've been talking about the oil prices. We've been talking about the strikes and the possible government shutdown. There are so many X factors. Where's the Fed when it comes to driving these stock prices?
The Fed has been behind the eight ball for quite a period of time. They were late in understanding that inflation was a problem, calling it transitory when it wasn't really going to be transitory. And the Fed is going to continue to be, I think, detrimental to share prices. It's going to continue to hold a tight monetary policy for a much longer period of time than people want to anticipate. It's going to be at least late into 2024, maybe into 2025, before the Fed begins the process of allowing the overnight Fed funds rate to decline. So you have to prepare yourself for an inverted yield curve for a long period of time going forward. Not higher prices or not higher levels of interest rates, but high levels of interest rates for a long period of time. So it's high for longer and not higher for longer.
Got it. That is a subtle difference, but a significant one. Dennis, thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Amy, always a pleasure. Thank you. An honor to be on in the morning.
Dennis Gartman, the University of Akron Endowment Chairman and former publisher of the Gartman Letter. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.